Welcome to heART Talk, episode 19. Em is an illustrator, a cultural worker, an organizer, and just an overall fantastic human being. Hello!
Hi.
Hi! Oh, it's nice to see you.
It's nice to see you too.
I have gotten to know you just over the last year and a half, and one thing I've noticed is how beautifully you weave people together and the people you surround yourself with, and also how you amplify others. So, what qualities do you look for in creatives that you want to support and the creatives you want around you?
I really love collaborations and I love making community. Black, Indigenous people of color and queer people and trans folks. And I also do birth work. So I work a lot with folks who are into reproductive justice and basically and then also not, I've had collaborations with all different types of folks. I'm pretty open when it comes to that, and it's something that I really love to do. So I usually leave a chunk of designated time in my schedule to work on collaborations.
Can you tell us about a few of the collaborations in relation to the movement?
I collaborated with The Road recently, Make the Road New York, and we created some Know Your Rights graphics. If ICE stops you in the streets. Basically, they created this survey for folks who had been arrested or who had had interactions with the police while protesting in New York. They basically were trying to gather data to have information on what's happening that's not one-sided. Art can be really relatable sometimes, and it can speak in ways that just words can't.
Your work is really bold and vibrant and colorful. Do you find yourself gravitating towards a certain color or color palette at a time, or right now is there something that's recurring a lot?
I like to play a lot with color. I do my makeup a lot, really colorful. My nails are always really colorful. And that's recent because I think that when I started making art, I tried to play more with color because that used to be a classic, wear all black New Yorker. So I don't know, once I started seeing playing with color in a bold way, I couldn't stop, basically.
A lot of your work and the influence of it has been immigration status. I would love just to hear a little bit about, you recently got to return to, I don't know if you'd call it a home country, but you recently got to travel for the first time out of the US. So what was that experience like and how did it impact your art?
So I grew up undocumented in New York. My family moved here when I was 7. My status didn't adjust up until last May. So it's, been just a year that I was able to travel outside the country. But I had DACA as soon as DACA came out. Aside from the connection of the name of the country or a nationality in that sense, I really did feel very connected to my roots. I grew up in a very Latinx home and I have always been connected. But that was really the desire to go back home, was to go visit my grandparents, because they're still there, and then to see the places where my parents were from, and that was really one of the most incredible experiences. It was almost like getting to know them in a different way, and I got to go with my wife, which was really awesome too, because I was really nervous of having to compromise my queer identity. A lot of queerness in the way that I experience it doesn't immediately translate into Spanish, and family can be traditional and there's a different set of expectations. You're I'm in a different country. It's just worried that I would be compromising some of the ways that I feel are really important for me to express myself. But having my wife there was so awesome because I always felt invisible, and it just felt comforting to be able to find strength in our queerness and still be myself. So
what was the impact of that journey on your art?
I did take a break from making art, and I think that's how my art benefited. It was nice. It was it's really important to get creative rest, because then I was doing a lot of absorbing, and when I came back I did art inspired by my trip, and a lot of it was still personal because I shared a few things. I have a piece that was Te extraño, wish you were here, and it was talking about having been where I was born without my parents, and just having this feeling of being this is really great, and also selfishly feeling it was incomplete because they weren't by my side. I think I was able to process a lot of those feelings through my art.
one thing I've seen you do now over the last few months is also these art prompts. There's one in particular, Let's Make Monsters.
My favorite part of social media is meeting other people and like sharing stuff and learning things and like bonding online. So I decided to share this art prompt, which was pretty vulnerable for me because it's called Making Monsters because it's like a way to process your feelings, and usually the feelings that I process through my art are like anxiety or fears, and like feelings that, much like monsters, are like scary but also largely misunderstood. I wanted to create something that was easy to engage in different levels and that like encouraged folks and encouraged me specifically to create art without an expectation of a final product, but rather to like experience the process. It was cool to see people resonate with it and try it. Some folks like sent me stuff they made later, and that was awesome.
You're an illustrator. I also know you play with some other mediums, including lino cuts, lino prints. So I would love to hear what you experienced when you were working with lino versus digital, and if there's a different message that comes about.
I definitely sense the difference, and I think a reason why I have a consistent practice with linoleum is because it doesn't involve screens, and it's just nice to like have like the tactile experience with art and like getting your hands dirty, and like it's very cliche, but like there's something about like getting ink on your hands and like carving stuff and like feeling things, you know. It's basically like making a stamp, and it's made out of rubber for folks who don't know, and you have like carving tools and you carve an image and then you use paint to print it. So it's just cool to see like, you know, graphic arts and like online design and things like that. It's really cool on screen, and it's cool to see how it prints. And it's awesome to be able to control that and make multiple prints that are the same but slightly different. It tends to be a limited color palette too, so it's challenging in that way. And like, because you're carving, you're playing with negative space, which is also a challenge for me. You know, I love my iPad, and I love it. Like, it changed my life, honestly, when I like discovered like digital illustration. But like, I'd also like, I work much faster, and sometimes it's not like, it's too much pressure to like finish something, like start it and finish on the same day. So
I would love to hear about Arabato Queer. Am I saying that right?
Yeah,
And you guys also did work for the Black Trans Lives Matter march.
We did a fundraiser,
okay.
And we also we went to a march. We went to the march together. We got like masks and water and like made signs, and like we're giving those things out while we were marching for folks who were there who didn't have a mask or who didn't have water. And then we also did a lot of fundraising for different organizations, and it felt really important, you know, to show up, like, because our work with Arabato Queer is very much community centered, and like that is what it means to be in community, you know, is to show up. So Arabato Queer is it's a space created by and for queer trans people of color, and it comes in the form of a party for now.
As a organizer that I really respect and a curator yourself, what are the ways that you've been seeing organizations that are POC but non-Black show up for the current movement, for the Black Lives Matter movement and the offshoots of that? What are the ways that you feel like that's been successful? And have you also seen examples of where you feel like it's being misinterpreted or misused? Because as someone who's South Asian, I've been seeing examples of South Asian organizations and communities show up or try to show up, and some I feel like are doing in a way that is amplifying and supporting, while others, it seems to center the experience about them. So I would love to just hear like your observations and thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be difficult because we're not Black, so our job is to like remember that we'll never know, and like we have to first listen and learn, right? There's also a lot of pressure for folks to show up, which is really important. And you know, different people are in different journeys of learning, but I think organizations, because they represent a bigger group and they're trying to represent community, they have more of a responsibility to like not get it right always, but to do the right thing and to like learn from mistakes and to do better, you know, to always strive to do better. And for me, I really appreciate when organizations aren't afraid to learn publicly and to exercise vulnerability when it comes to being called in and accepting that something went wrong. And after that, like the next step is like we're taking, like, these are the steps we're doing and this is how we're learning, and like this is who we're listening to, and like this is how we're making sure that this doesn't happen again. And and that they acknowledge that even if your intentions are to do good, you can still cause harm. My opinion about anti-racist work is that we will never be experts, and we always have to be willing to learn, and we always have to be willing to be called in, and we always have to consider it a gift when we get called in.
I've been observing call-out culture and cancel culture, and how do we allow for people to model accountability and vulnerability and see if we can accomplish something restorative. Sometimes I fear that cancel culture veers on also a very punitive, like policing culture.
I think there's a difference, and I think also like folks forget that like anti-racist work exists outside of the internet. So like the internet is like while it's really great and it provides a platform for folks to connect and for folks to learn and for folks to do more from like the limited space, it also like it comes with its limits, and those limits are you don't always have to be behind the screen. Like sometimes the things that get traction like shouldn't be getting traction, and the things that should be getting traction don't get traction. Like already at a base level, it's very flawed, just like everything else. So I think that like there needs to be nuance, right? And like, but that nuance can never be at the expense of of expressing harm and of trying to correct that harm and of taking the steps to prevent it from happening again. Because if we're prioritizing how we're dealing with like exposing harm and not prioritizing actually correcting that harm and taking the steps to not cause harm again, then like there's not even an opinion on cancel culture, because we're not even talking about the right thing. Yeah, I think it's difficult, but I think that's why it's important to remember that we're all building together. We're literally actively building better worlds, and that comes with a lot of unlearning, which is really difficult.
So that being said, I would love to give you a moment just to plug or share anything you have coming up, how people can find you, and then we'll have a quick show and tell where I can show you a few pieces that I pulled to get your thoughts on.
We talked about Adrebato. You can find as at Adrebato Queer, that's the tag, and then you can find my art at Emulsify.art. And I also want to uplift the work of Four Sibs, which is a collective by and for Black trans folks, and I know that their donations are open right now. If you haven't heard of Four Sibs, definitely check them out. I'm pretty sure that's their tag on Instagram.
So I pulled a few pieces by some artists, and there's reasons that I pulled them for you, but I'm going to see just your immediate response.
Ooh, okay.
Okay. This is a body painting.
I love that.
Why do you love it, Em?
Because like that blue, I also really appreciate what appears to be like the veins, but they are very reminiscent of like plant veins as well, but also of like the circulatory system. I love exploring the connection between systems like in the universe and how like they correlate. That's something that like freaks me out when I think about of like how we're so small and the universe is so big, and we also are so similar and have so many like similar functions.
It's actually by the next artist, Flash, DFC2.
Ooh, that's cool. Ooh, I love, that's what I'm talking about, like the red, pink, orange. I also really love the fluidity of this piece, and I think I'm drawn to that, and I also, it gives me the sense of body without feeling contained, which I think is really hard to do.
This is called Love, and it's by Tana Torrent, and it's kind of an ode to her like maternal love, like her relationship with her mother.
I love the limited color palette here, and like how like it evokes emotion really well. It feels really powerful, this piece. I love that like the blue is spilling out of their head. I have a series called depressiva, which is just like depression or like feeling depressed, where like something's melting off like the person's face. And it's both eerie and also really draws me in.
This is by Jessica Swindle, Color Energy. Well, this was such a pleasure, Em. Thank you so much for joining me.
This was so, yeah, see you soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.